Today, we're going deep with John Maxwell and excerpts from his book, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn.
Oh, this is going to be good.
It is, right. It's all about turning those setbacks, the losses, into, wins, into opportunities to learn and grow.
And Maxwell, he's not afraid to get real, is he?
Not at all. He dives right into the tough stuff, but not to, wallow in negativity.
Right. It's more about how to find those valuable lessons hidden inside those experiences.
And he tells some amazing stories.
Yeah.
Remember that one where he forgot his passport?
Oh, before that big speaking gig in Edmonton.
Yeah, a $20,000 mistake. Can you imagine? Talk about a scramble to fix that. Makes you really think about the cost of avoiding reality, doesn't it?
It does, and it just proves his point. It's so much easier to go from failure to success than from excuses to success.
Right. Avoiding reality, making excuses, it just delays things, often makes things worse.
Exactly.
So it's about owning up to our mistakes, learning from them, and moving on. No more sweeping things under the rug.
Right, no more hiding.
But then Maxwell lays down these three, I wouldn't call them feel-good truths. They're kind of hard to swallow.
He calls them the realities of life, right?
Yeah.
Life isn't fair. Reality is our friend. And life, not easy.
No, not always.
I think a lot of people struggle with those truths, try to fight them. But Maxwell says accepting them. That's the key to becoming resilient.
It's like he's saying, hey, life's not a fairy tale, let's get real. And once we accept that, then we can stop expecting things to just be handed to us and start taking charge, right?
Exactly. Take ownership. But I think a lot of people wonder how to actually apply that. It can feel a bit overwhelming.
It can, yeah. It's like, okay, I get it, but now what? But Maxwell, he gives us a great example of putting this into practice. Remember the story about him trying to launch small groups at his church?
Oh, yeah. Sounds like a fantastic idea.
Totally. But it was a total flop. And why? He missed a crucial step. Training enough leaders, so even with the best intentions.
You need a solid plan.
Right. Enthusiasm without planning. It sets you up for a fall.
Absolutely.
But there's one thing that really stood out to me in the book. Maxwell's idea that the most important ability we have is responsibility.
Oh, that's a good one.
What struck you about that?
He directly contrasts it with the victim mentality, which I think is so powerful. He even tells this story about a man, right? This man sues a parking lot owner after his car gets stolen, and tragically he gets killed while driving it.
Oh, wow.
It's almost absurd when you think about it. But it really highlights how dangerous it can be to refuse to take responsibility for your own life.
Right. It's like playing the victim just keeps you stuck.
Keeps you from having control.
So how do we get out of that victim mode? How do we actually take control?
Maxwell says it all starts with self-improvement, calls it the first domino.
Oh, I like that.
If you want to improve your life, any part of it, you got to start with yourself.
Makes sense. Build that strong foundation. But that means stepping outside our comfort zones, right?
Sometimes, yeah. Which can be scary.
Totally. I mean, even Maxwell admits he can be resistant to change. Remember his story about Twitter?
Oh, yeah. He wasn't a fan at first. Thought it was useless.
Right. But then his friend Norwood Davis explained it to him over dinner, showed him the potential.
Totally changed his mind.
I think we all have those moments, right? Where we think something's pointless until we understand it.
It's like, don't knock it till you try it.
Exactly. And being open to new things, being willing to learn, that's what Maxwell calls teachability.
And it's not just about personal growth.
Yeah.
He cites this study where 46% of new hires failed within 18 months. Main reason, lack of teachability.
Wow, that's huge. So learning new things is also essential for career success.
Absolutely.
Okay, so how do we become more teachable? Where do we even start?
Maxwell has some simple but powerful tips. First, believe that everyone has something to teach you. Second, expect to learn something new every day. And third, every time you learn something, you benefit. Remember that.
That's great advice. It's like approaching life with a sense of curiosity, knowing there's always something new to discover. And speaking of learning from unexpected places, let's talk about Marshall Taylor, the Black Cyclone.
Oh, yeah, the world champion cyclist.
The one and only. He faced incredible adversity, racial prejudice, physical threats, you name it.
And he still became a champion.
He did. And his story perfectly illustrates what Maxwell calls the if factor.
The idea that adversity, if you embrace it, can make you extraordinary.
Right. It's like those challenges, they became the fuel that pushed him to greatness. But let's be real, problems are a part of life for everyone.
Everyone.
Maxwell reminds us of that. He even quotes former GE CEO Immelt, who said, "My second day as chairman, a plane I lease, flying with engines I built, crashed into a building I insure, and it was covered by a network I own." Talk about a rough start.
Wow. That's one for the books.
It is, right? Puts things in perspective. But what I find fascinating is that Maxwell actually encourages us to see problems as opportunities, to learn and to grow.
Yeah. He even tells a funny story about a man and his wife. She keeps thinking there's a burglar.
Oh, I love that one.
It's a reminder that sometimes all you need is a shift in perspective.
A little humor can go a long way. And he also talks about rewriting the endings of our bad experiences.
Mhm.
Like, he lost his entire manuscript for the 17 indisputable laws of teamwork. I can't even imagine the panic. But he used it as a chance to develop better habits, better systems.
It's about asking, how can I make myself better because of this?
So true, finding that silver lining. But it's also important to remember that we're all human. Even presidents have bad days.
Yeah.
Maxwell throws in this funny anecdote about President George H.W. Bush throwing up at a state dinner.
That's a good one. It makes you realize that we all have those moments.
Exactly. But then he shifts gears and talks about the power of change. He calls it a gift.
A gift, huh? Doesn't always feel that way.
No, it doesn't. But he tells this incredible story about Coffee City, Alabama. Their entire economy was built on cotton, right? Then boll weevils wiped out their crops. Total disaster.
So what did they do?
They embraced the change. They started growing peanuts. And thanks to this scientist, George Washington Carver, they discovered all these new uses for them, from chemicals to cosmetics. Rebuilt their entire economy.
Wow. That's inspiring.
It shows that even when change is forced upon us, it can lead to amazing things.
Yeah.
And it's not just about external circumstances, right? It's about our attitudes and who we surround ourselves with, people who challenge us to grow. But then Maxwell throws in this curveball. Success is a lousy teacher. He even quotes Bill Gates, who said, "Success makes smart people think they can't lose."
I can see that happening, for sure.
It's like we get so caught up in our wins that we forget to keep learning.
Complacency can creep in.
Exactly. So how do we avoid that trap?
Maxwell introduces this idea of a strength zone and a comfort zone.
Okay.
He says we should work within our strengths, but also step outside our comfort zones regularly.
Find that sweet spot.
Yeah, that's where growth happens.
It's like pushing your boundaries, but playing to your strengths at the same time.
Makes sense, right?
It does. So we're talking about embracing discomfort, but doing it strategically.
Exactly. And that leads us to another important concept, unlearning.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
Maxwell quotes Satchel Paige, the baseball pitcher, who said, "It's not what you don't know that hurts you. It's what you do know that just ain't so."
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's a reminder that sometimes our biggest obstacle is what we think we know.
So it's about challenging our beliefs.
Exactly. Being open to new information, even if it means admitting we were wrong.
That takes humility. But how do we actually unlearn things?
Well, one way is through continuous learning. Maxwell says he makes an effort to learn something new every single day.
Wow, that's impressive.
And that's how he's managed to write over 70 books. He never stops learning, never stops filling his well of knowledge.
So learning becomes a lifestyle, not just a one-time thing.
Exactly. And discipline is key. Maxwell points out that people overestimate what they can achieve in a day or week, but underestimate what they can accomplish in a year. It's about consistency over time.
Those small, consistent actions, they add up.
They do, like building a muscle. It takes dedication and repetition. And speaking of support, Maxwell also emphasizes having people in your life who can give you honest feedback.
Oh yeah, that's so important.
He even says he used to ask Steve Baby, who oversaw tons of churches, to critique his leadership every year.
Wow. That's a great example of humility, being willing to be challenged, even when you're in a position of authority.
It is. And, one of the things I appreciate about Maxwell is how he blends these profound insights with real-life stories.
Oh, totally. It makes it so relatable.
Yeah, and inspiring.
Like, remember when he talks about hope?
Oh, yeah.
He describes it as the fuel that keeps us going when things get tough.
And he shares the story of his first book, Think on These Things. It was all about helping people live those positive, fulfilling lives.
Right. And I love how he emphasizes that hope isn't just a feeling, it's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
We choose to be hopeful. We choose to set goals, surround ourselves with positive people.
And he uses the example of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt during World War II and how Winston Churchill He became this beacon of hope for England during those dark days of the war.
Yeah, that was powerful.
It shows that hope can be contagious. It can lift an entire nation. But now get ready for this. We're going to talk about something that might seem a little strange. Learning to appreciate problems.
Wait, what? Appreciate
I
problems.
know, it sounds weird, right?
Totally. Who wants to appreciate a problem?
Nobody. But Maxwell says if we shift our perspective, if we start seeing problems as opportunities for growth, well, we're going to be much better at handling them.
Okay, I'm listening.
He even uses this great example of floating soap, which led to the creation of Ivory soap. What started as a mistake, a manufacturing glitch, became a huge success.
So sometimes our biggest breakthroughs come from those initial setbacks.
Exactly. And Maxwell is also clear. Don't wait for problems to solve themselves. He quotes Mina DeSesa, who led McCann Erickson, the ad agency. She observed that in tough situations, morale's low, fear's high, the good people are leaving, and the flackers, they're hiding.
Sounds familiar.
Right. These are problems that need to be tackled head on, not ignored.
It's like that saying, a problem ignored is a problem multiplied. Sometimes you got to get your hands dirty to find a solution.
You do. And Maxwell even throws in a little humor here. Tells this story about a guy being robbed, and as the burglar's leaving, the guy says, "Hey, before you go, would you mind coming upstairs and beating my wife? She's been expecting you every night for the past 30 years."
Oh, I love that one. Classic.
Sometimes, even in tough situations, a little humor can go a long way.
It can, yeah. And speaking of perspective, Maxwell is all about understanding everyone's viewpoint when trying to solve a problem.
He's big on gathering information, listening to different experiences before jumping into solutions. And sometimes, in that process, you realize the problem is not what you thought it was.
You learn something new.
Exactly. Which brings us back to responsibility. Remember that story Maxwell tells about the guy who gets convicted of flashing people over 30 times?
Oh, yeah.
Then he gets denied a job as a park attendant because of his record, and he sues. His argument: he'd never exposed himself in a park.
No way. Seriously.
It's a perfect example of the victim mentality. Instead of taking responsibility, he's trying to blame everyone else. And Maxwell says that kind of thinking is so destructive, it keeps you from learning and growing.
It does. It's like you're trapped in a cage of your own excuses.
And Maxwell challenges us to break free, to embrace responsibility as something that empowers us.
So it's about realizing we have a choice in how we respond to things.
Exactly. Even in challenging situations. And to illustrate that, he shares the story of Olympic swimmer Missy Franklin. She missed qualifying for the Olympics in an event she'd previously won a gold medal in. Devastating. But she chose to see it as a learning experience.
And it fueled her comeback.
It did. It's a reminder that we always have a choice.
We were talking about this whole unlearning thing.
Ah, yes. Letting go of those old beliefs that might be holding us back.
It sounds a bit backward, but I'm starting to get it. Like, how do we actually do that? Unlearn stuff.
Well, Maxwell says it takes humility.
Mm-hmm.
Being willing to let go of what we think we know,
Mm.
and being open to new perspectives, even if they go against everything we thought was true.
It's like clearing out the cobwebs, making room for something new, a mental spring cleaning.
Exactly. And, one of the best ways to unlearn?
What's that?
Continuous learning. Maxwell makes a point of learning something new every single day. That's how he's written over 70 books. He never runs out of things to say because he's always adding to his knowledge bank.
That's amazing. He's made learning a lifestyle, not just a phase.
Right. It's like the day you stop learning is the day you stop growing.
So true. But how do we make time for that? Life gets busy.
Maxwell's got an answer for that, too. He says people tend to overestimate what they can do in a day or a week, but they underestimate what they can do in a year.
It's the long game.
Exactly. It's about consistency. Small steps, repeated over time, lead to big results.
It's like building muscle. You got to work at it consistently.
Exactly. And you know what else helps? Having people around you who can give honest feedback.
Ooh, that's important.
Maxwell says he used to ask Steve Baby, who was in charge of a bunch of churches, to critique his leadership once a year.
Wow, that's humbling to ask for criticism, especially when you're in a leadership position.
It is. But it's essential for growth. But you know what I love about Maxwell? He doesn't just talk about all this heavy stuff.
Right.
He brings in those relatable, inspiring stories. Like, remember when he talks about hope?
Oh, yeah.
He calls it the fuel that keeps us going when things are tough.
The spark that keeps us motivated. And he even tells the story of his first book, Think on These Things, remember? It was all about helping people build those fulfilling lives.
He's all about finding the good, even in the tough times. And what really struck me was that he doesn't see hope as just a feeling, you know? It's an action.
A choice we make.
Exactly. We choose to set goals, to surround ourselves with positive people, to focus on the good.
And he uses those powerful examples like Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt during World War II and Winston Churchill becoming a symbol of hope for England.
It's amazing how hope can lift an entire nation, give them the strength to keep going.
It's contagious, almost. But you know what we haven't talked about yet?
What's that?
Maxwell's idea of learning to appreciate problems.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
It sounds a little crazy, right?
It does. Who wants to appreciate problems?
Exactly. But Maxwell says if we can shift our perspective, see those problems as opportunities for growth, well, we'll be much better at handling them.
He even gives that example of floating soap.
Oh, yeah, the ivory soap story.
It started as a mistake, a manufacturing problem, and it turned into a huge success.
Proof that sometimes our biggest breakthroughs come from those initial setbacks.
Totally. And Maxwell warns us not to wait for problems to just disappear on their own.
Right.
He quotes Nina DeSesa, the CEO of that ad agency, McCann Erickson. She said in turnaround situations, you know the tough ones. Morale is low, people are scared, the good ones are leaving, and the lazy ones, well, they're hiding.
Hiding from the work.
Exactly. And she realized those are problems that you got to deal with head on.
A problem ignored is a problem multiplied.
Exactly. Sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and get a little messy to find the solution.
And sometimes you just gotta laugh.
Oh, yeah. Maxwell tells that funny story about the guy who's being robbed, and as the robber's leaving, the guy says, hey, before you go, why don't you come upstairs and meet my wife? She's been expecting you every night for the last 30 years.
Oh, that one cracks me up every time.
It's classic.
Yeah,
A little humor can make a big difference.
it can. And speaking of perspective, Maxwell's a big believer in understanding everyone's point of view when you're trying to solve a problem.
He's all about gathering information, listening to everyone's experience before jumping to conclusions. And sometimes in that process, you realize the problem isn't what you thought it was.
It's a learning experience in itself.
Absolutely. And it all comes back to taking responsibility. You know that story Maxwell tells about the guy convicted of flashing people like over 30 times?
Yeah.
He gets denied a job as a park attendant because of his record, and he sues. Says he's never done it in a park.
That's just ridiculous.
It is. Classic victim mentality. And Maxwell says that kind of thinking, it just keeps you stuck, prevents you from growing.
It does.
He challenges us to embrace responsibility as something that empowers us.
To realize that we have a choice.
Always a choice. And to illustrate that, he tells the story of Olympic swimmer Missy Franklin.
Yeah.
Remember, she missed qualifying for the Olympics in an event she'd won a gold medal in before.
Heartbreaking.
It was. But she used that experience, she learned from it, and it fueled her comeback.
It's about turning those setbacks into stepping stones.
Exactly. It's a choice. And speaking of choices, Maxwell also talks about the importance of delaying gratification.
Oh, yeah. Remember that study with the kids and the marshmallows?
Oh yeah, the marshmallow test.
They were told they could have 2 marshmallows if they waited, but if they ate the first one right away, that's all they got.
And the kids who could wait. They ended up doing better in life, better grades, less likely to get into trouble.
Amazing, right? It shows the power of self-control, of focusing on the long-term goals.
Maxwell says that applies to all parts of life. Our relationships, our careers, everything. It's about making choices today that'll set us up for success tomorrow.
So important. But you know what else really resonated with me?
What's that?
Maxwell's idea that maturity comes from learning to earn respect, both for ourselves and for others. He tells that story about his friend, the counselor, who told him he was too easy on his kids, helping them too quickly when they had problems.
Oh yeah, that's a tough one for parents.
It is. You want to protect them, but you also realize they need to learn their own lessons.
Is finding that balance.
Exactly. And Maxwell emphasizes that real self-respect, it's not something you're just given. You have to earn it.
It's about living by your values.
Holding yourself to a high standard and taking responsibility for your choices.
He tells some great stories to illustrate that. Like, remember Gail Borden Jr.? He spent the first 50 years of his life basically going from one failure to the next.
Oh yeah, the condensed milk guy. But I had no idea he had such a tough start.
He did. He had this meat biscuit that flopped, lost a ton of money in a land scheme. Even his newspaper went bankrupt.
Yikes. But he didn't give up.
Nope. And finally, in his 50s, he hit it big with condensed milk.
What a story. It's proof that it's never too late to succeed.
And it shows the power of learning from your failures. And you know what? That story leads us perfectly into Maxwell's discussion about the dangers of
Oh
success.
yeah, there's a dark side to winning.
There can be. Maxwell warns that success can be a lousy teacher because it can make us complacent, entitled, afraid to take risks.
It's like we start believing we're invincible.
Exactly. He even quotes Bill Gates, who said, "Success makes smart people think they can't lose."
So how do we avoid that trap? How do we stay hungry, even when we're winning?
Maxwell says we need to be aware of those pitfalls, like the been there, done that mentality, where we think we know it all,
Right.
or the banquet tour, where we're so busy talking about our past accomplishments that we stop doing the work.
Been there.
Right. And then there's the momentum myth, where we think we can just coast on our past successes.
So it's about staying humble, staying focused on the present.
Exactly. And Maxwell says one of the best ways to counteract those pitfalls is to keep developing our strengths, but also to keep pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones.
Find that sweet spot.
Okay, so back to the arrival plateau.
Yeah.
How do we avoid getting stuck there?
Yeah, like you reach your goal, you're on top of the world, and then what?
Right. It's like, now what? But the key is recognizing that achieving a goal isn't the end. It's more like a checkpoint, a place to pause, reflect, and then set your sights even higher.
So it's not about arriving, it's about the journey.
Exactly. Maxwell says we need to cultivate a growth mindset, to always be learning and evolving no matter what we've already achieved.
So lifelong learning. But how do we make that a part of our everyday lives? I mean, we're all busy.
Well, Maxwell emphasizes setting new goals, seeking out new experiences, surrounding yourself with people who inspire you.
People who push you to be better.
Exactly. It's about staying curious, asking questions, actively looking for ways to grow.
To become more than we are today.
Right. And remember how we were talking about thinking differently? Maxwell believes successful people have a different way of approaching problems in time.
Yeah, they don't get bogged down in the negative.
Exactly. They're solution-oriented. They don't see problems as roadblocks, but as opportunities.
Hmm.
And they're really good at managing their time, focusing on what truly matters.
So it's about being more strategic, more intentional with our time and energy.
Exactly. And Maxwell also talks about handling emotions differently. He says successful people, they don't let their feelings control their actions.
So you don't let fear or doubt hold you back.
Right. They actually act their way into feeling.
What does that even mean? Act your way into feeling.
It means taking action, even when you don't feel like it, knowing that the right actions will eventually lead to the right feelings.
So it's not about waiting for the motivation to strike. It's about taking action first.
Exactly. And that's where discipline comes in, building those good habits that support your goals, making those small, consistent choices every day.
It all comes back to consistency, doesn't it? The small steps add up over time.
They do. And as we've been talking about all this, I keep thinking back to Maxwell's emphasis on unlearning.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful idea.
He really is. He challenges us to question our assumptions, to be open to new ideas, even to let go of beliefs that aren't serving us anymore.
It's like hitting the reset button on our thinking, making room for new perspectives.
Exactly. It's about approaching life with a beginner's mind, with curiosity and humility, knowing there's always more to learn.
And I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into John Maxwell's War. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. From facing reality and taking responsibility to finding hope and embracing change, we've covered a lot of ground. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final question to ponder. If you could choose one area of your life where you could benefit from a little discomfort, a little pushing outside your comfort zone, what would it be?
That's a great question to think about, because sometimes that discomfort is where the biggest growth happens.
It is. So to all of you listening, we hope you've been inspired to turn those setbacks into stepping stones, to embrace the challenges and the opportunities that life throws your way.
And to always remember, there's always more to learn, more to grow, and more to become.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving for that extraordinary life.
We'll see you soon.